A girl's dying wish was to see her childhood friend one last time, and what the German Shepherd did next left everyone speechless. A 12-year-old girl lies in a hospital bed, her heartbeat fading fast, begging to see the only friend who ever made her feel safe. But that friend isn't a person. It's a dog she lost years ago, a dog she believes abandoned her. What she doesn't know is that the truth is far darker, and that this German Shepherd carries a secret buried deep in her past. When the dog suddenly breaks free from miles away and begins a desperate journey through a violent storm, something impossible starts happening. He's not just running back to her. He's carrying something no one expects, something that could change everything. But time is disappearing. Rules are blocking the way, and the closer he gets, the stranger the mystery becomes. If this dog reaches her in time, will it save her life? Or reveal a truth her family never wanted her to know? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The rhythmic beeping of monitors had become as familiar to Eloise Monroe as her own heartbeat. She lay in the sterile hospital bed, her thin frame nearly lost among the white sheets and tangle of medical equipment. Through the window of her room, in the cardiac ward, she could see fat snowflakes drifting past, making the world outside look soft and peaceful, so different from the sharp edges and harsh fluorescent lights inside. Eloise's fingers traced the plastic tubing that delivered oxygen to her nose. After 12 years of living with a failing heart, she knew every procedure, every machine, every routine, but this time felt different. The collapse at home had been worse than ever before. She remembered how quickly it had happened. One moment she had been helping her mom fold laundry in the living room, telling a story about her friend Sarah from school. The next moment, the world had tilted sideways. The basket of warm towels had slipped from her hands. Her chest had squeezed tight, like a giant fist crushing her ribs. "Mom," she had managed to whisper before everything went dark. Now, hours later, Eloise could still hear her mother's terrified voice calling her name, still feel her father's strong arms scooping her up as he ran to the car. The emergency room doctors had worked quickly, their faces grim as they hooked her up to machines and administered medications through an IV. Through the fog of sedation, Eloise heard fragments of conversation outside her door. The doctors were talking to her parents again. Their voices were low, serious. Words like critical condition and organ failure drifted through the gap under the door. "We need to be realistic about her chances," a doctor was saying. "This episode indicates significant deterioration." Eloise turned her head on the pillow, trying to block out the voices. Her gaze fell on the small, stuffed German Shepherd that sat on her bedside table. It was worn and slightly flat from years of being hugged, but its amber eyes still seemed to glow with warmth. She had named it Atlas Jr. after her real dog, her best friend who had disappeared 4 years ago. The door opened, and her parents entered. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed, though she tried to smile. Her father hung back near the doorway, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Eloise had gotten good at reading their faces over the years, at understanding the things they tried to hide from her. "Hey, sweetheart," Elise said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking Eloise's small hand in hers. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Eloise whispered. Her voice sounded far away, even to herself. "Did the doctors tell you what's wrong?" Elise squeezed her hand. "Your heart is having a harder time than usual, baby. But we're going to fight this, just like we always do." Eloise looked at her father, still hovering by the door. His face was pale, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. That's when she knew, really knew, that this time was different. "Mom?" Eloise's voice trembled. "I need to tell you something important." "What is it, sweetie?" Eloise gathered her strength, each word requiring effort through the medication's haze. If I can't, she swallowed hard. "I want to see Atlas again. Just one more time." The effect of her words was immediate. Her mother's hand tightened around hers, and a small sound escaped her throat. By the door, her father made a sudden movement, like someone had struck him. "Oh, Eloise," Elise whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Please," Eloise continued, her own eyes filling with tears. "I know he ran away, but maybe someone found him. Maybe we could find him now. I just want to say goodbye this time." Jonah Monroe turned abruptly and walked out of the room, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Eloise felt her mother's hand trembling in hers. "I miss him so much, Mom," Eloise said, her voice breaking. "He always made me feel safe. When I was scared about surgeries or tests, he would put his head on my lap, and everything felt better. I need him now." Elise stroked Eloise's hair, her other hand wiping at her own tears. "I know, baby. I know." "Why did he leave us?" Eloise asked, the question she'd carried for 4 years finally spilling out. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." Elise's voice was fierce. "You did nothing wrong, Eloise. Nothing at all." She took a deep breath, seeming to make a decision. "I promise you I will do everything I can to find out what happened to Atlas. Everything." Eloise closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. The monitors continued their steady beeping, marking each precious heartbeat. Outside in the hallway, she could hear her father's voice, raised in what sounded like argument with someone. "Mom?" she whispered, already drifting toward sleep. "What? If Atlas forgot about me?" "Never," Elise said firmly, tucking the blanket around her daughter's shoulders. "A love like that doesn't forget." As Eloise slipped into unconsciousness, her fingers curled around the stuffed dog beside her. In her mind, she could still feel Atlas's warm fur, still see his intelligent amber eyes watching over her. Somewhere out there, she thought, he must be missing her too. The last thing she heard was her mother's voice, soft but determined. "I promise you, Eloise, whatever it takes." In the hallway, Jonah Monroe pressed his forehead against the cold hospital wall, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The weight of a 4-year-old secret pressed down on him like lead, while inside the room, his daughter's heart monitor continued its uncertain rhythm, counting out the precious time they had left to make things right. Through the window, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in a blanket of white, while inside room 212 of the cardiac ward, a family teetered on the edge of either breakdown or breakthrough, their future hanging on the truth about a German shepherd named Atlas and the love that might just be strong enough to bring him home. The cardiac ward fell quiet as evening settled in, with only the steady rhythm of monitors breaking the silence. Elise Monroe sat beside Eloise's bed, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall with each precious breath. The crisis had passed, for now, but the fear lingered like a shadow in the room. Through the window, streetlights cast an orange glow across Eloise's pale face. She looked so small against the white hospital sheets, surrounded by machines that tracked every flutter of her struggling heart. Elise reached out to smooth a strand of hair from Eloise's forehead, her touch gentle enough not to wake her. "Her numbers are looking better," Jonah said from the doorway, his voice barely above a whisper. He held 2 paper cups of coffee, offering one to Elise. She accepted it without looking at him, her eyes fixed on Eloise. "She didn't just make up that story about Atlas running away," she said quietly. "Did she?" Jonah's cup trembled slightly, coffee threatening to spill over the rim. "Elise, please, not now." "Then when?" She turned to face him, keeping her voice low but intense. "Our daughter is lying here, asking to see her dog one last time, and you can barely stay in the room. What aren't you telling me?" "I'm just worried about Eloise," he said, but his eyes slid away from hers. "We both are. Let's focus on that." Elise stood up slowly, her exhaustion evident in every movement. "I'm going home for an hour to shower and get some fresh clothes. While I'm there, I'm going to look through our old files." "What?" Jonah's face paled. "Why would you—" "Because something isn't right," she cut him off. "Atlas didn't just disappear. He was the most loyal dog I've ever known. He slept outside Eloise's door every night. He followed her, everywhere. Dogs like that don't just run away." Jonah set his coffee down with shaking hands. "It was 4 years ago. What good can come from digging up the past now?" "Our daughter asked for one thing, Jonah. One thing." Elise gathered her purse, her movements deliberate and determined. "If there's even a chance we can find out what happened to Atlas, we owe her that." At home, Elise went straight to the storage closet. She pulled out box after box, searching through old papers and photographs. Each image of Atlas with Eloise made her heart ache. The big German shepherd patient, and gentle with the small girl, his amber eyes always watchful, always protective. In one photo, Eloise sat on the front porch, her arm around Atlas's neck. She was wearing her favorite pink sweater, and Atlas leaned into her with complete devotion. The date stamp showed it was taken just 2 weeks before he disappeared. Elise dug deeper into the boxes, looking for anything related to Atlas. Vet records, registration papers, the original adoption documents from when they'd first brought him home. As she searched, a pattern began to emerge. Or rather, a hole in the pattern. There were no missing dog posters, no record of calls to local shelters, no evidence that they'd ever actually searched for Atlas at all. How had she not noticed this before? The endless hospital visits with Eloise, the mounting medical bills, the constant crisis mode they'd been living in. It had all blurred together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonah. "Please come back. We need to talk." Elise ignored it, pulling out her laptop instead. She began searching local shelter records from 4 years ago, working backward from the date Atlas vanished. After an hour of searching, her hand froze over the mousepad. There it was. A German shepherd matching Atlas's description, brought to the county shelter 4 years and 2 months ago. The intake photo showed those same intelligent amber eyes, that distinctive white patch on his chest. Her phone buzzed again. "Jonah, whatever you're doing, stop. You'll make everything worse." Tears blurred Elise's vision as anger and understanding crashed over her. The timing of Atlas's disappearance, right when Eloise's medical bills had started overwhelming them. Jonah's strange behavior whenever the dog was mentioned. His resistance to searching now. She dialed the shelter's number with trembling fingers. "Yes, I'm calling about a German shepherd that was brought in 4 years ago. I need to know what happened to him." The clerk's typing echoed through the phone. "Let me check those records. Yes, I have it here. That dog was surrendered by his owner on October 12th. "Surrendered?" Elise's voice cracked. "Not found as a stray?" "No, ma'am. It was an owner surrender. The dog was adopted 2 weeks later by a private security firm. That's all I can tell you without proper authorization." Elise ended the call, her mind racing. Owner surrender. Not lost, not running away. Given up. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. Her phone buzzed one more time. Jonah again. "I did what I had to do. Please understand." Elise stared at the message, tears rolling down her cheeks. In her mind, she saw Eloise in her hospital bed, asking for the one thing she thought she couldn't have. She saw Atlas, loyal and loving, taken away without even a chance to say goodbye. She gathered the shelter records and photos, placing them carefully in her bag. The truth was worse than she'd imagined, but she wouldn't stop now. Somewhere out there, Atlas was alive. Someone had adopted him. And if there was even the smallest chance of fulfilling Eloise's wish, she would find him. As she drove back to the hospital, her resolve hardened. Jonah was right about one thing. This would make everything worse before it got better. But Eloise deserved the truth. And more than that, she deserved her chance to see Atlas again. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing in the gathering dusk. Elise parked in the familiar spot, her bag heavy with evidence of a betrayal she was only beginning to understand. Above, in room 212, her daughter slept, dreaming perhaps of a loyal dog who had never chosen to leave her. And somewhere in this city, that same dog might be dreaming too, remembering a little girl who had once been his whole world. Elise sat in her car outside the shelter, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The morning sun slanted through the windshield, but she felt cold inside. After a deep breath, she grabbed her folder of documents and walked into the building. The front desk clerk looked up with a practiced smile. "How can I help you today?" "I need information about a German Shepherd that was adopted from here about 4 years ago," Elise said, pulling out the intake photo she'd printed. "This one." The clerk's smile faded slightly. "Ma'am, as I mentioned on the phone, we can't release adoption records without proper authorization." "Please," Elise's voice cracked. "My daughter is dying. This was her dog, and her last wish is to see him again. I'm not here to cause trouble, I just need to know who adopted him." Something in Elise's tone must have reached the clerk. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Wait here." Minutes later, an older woman in a shelter uniform appeared. "I'm Margaret, the shelter director. Come to my office." Inside the small office, Margaret studied the photo and pulled up records on her computer. "I remember this dog. Beautiful temperament, extremely well trained. It was unusual to get one of his quality as a surrender." Elise flinched at the word surrender. Margaret noticed and gave her a sympathetic look. "The adopter was Silas Red," Margaret said quietly. "Former military K-9 handler. He runs a private security firm now. The dog, Atlas, went through their training program." Elise scribbled down the information with shaking hands. "Do you have contact information?" Margaret hesitated, then wrote down a phone number. "Mr. Red is particular about his privacy, but there was something else about this case." She pulled a yellowed piece of paper from the file. "This was pinned to Atlas's kennel when he was surrendered." Elise took the paper carefully. The childish handwriting made her heart stop. "Dear whoever adopts Atlas, please take good care of him. He's the best dog in the whole world. He gives the best hugs and always knows when you're sad. I love him very much, but Daddy says we can't keep him anymore. Please tell him I'm sorry, and I'll always love him. Love, Eloise Monroe." Tears splashed onto the paper. Elise remembered that day. Eloise had been in the hospital for tests, and when they came home, Atlas was gone. Jonah had said he must have slipped out of the yard. They had believed him. Back in her car, Elise's hands shook as she dialed Silas Red's number. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Red Security." "Mr. Red, my name is Elise Monroe. I'm calling about a German Shepherd you adopted 4 years ago. Atlas." There was a long pause. "How did you get this number?" "The shelter gave it to me. Please, I need to talk to you about Atlas. He belonged to my daughter, Eloise." "The girl who wrote the note," Silas interrupted. His voice had changed slightly. "Yes. Mr. Red, my daughter is very sick. She's in the hospital and she's asked to see Atlas. It's her last wish. Would you consider—" "No." The word came sharp and final. "Atlas is 8 years old now. He's retired from service work. I don't drag him across the country for emotional reunions." "We're in the same city," Elise said quickly. "At Children's Hospital downtown. Please, she's only 12. She thinks he ran away, but he was surrendered without her knowing. She just wants to see him one last time." Another long pause filled the line. When Silas spoke again, his voice was quieter. "The note. Your daughter wrote that she loved him and was sorry." "Yes." "I kept it. Been carrying it in my wallet for 4 years." There was the sound of paper unfolding. "Never knew why. Atlas is different from other dogs I've trained. More purposeful, somehow. Like he's always waiting for something." Elise held her breath, afraid to break the moment. "I'll think about it," Silas said finally. "No promises, but I'll think about it." The line went dead. Elise sat in the parking lot, hope and despair warring in her chest. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonah. "Where are you?" She stared at the message, anger rising fresh and hot. Taking a deep breath, she started the car and headed for the hospital. She needed to face her husband with what she'd learned. Jonah was waiting in the hospital corridor, pacing. When he saw her face, he stopped dead. "You know," he said quietly. "How could you?" Elise's voice shook. "How could you just give him away? Let Eloise believe he ran away. Let her carry that guilt for 4 years?" "We were drowning in medical bills." Jonah's words came out in a rush. "The insurance wasn't covering everything, and Atlas's hip surgery was going to cost thousands we didn't have. I had to choose, the dog or Eloise's treatment." "You didn't choose anything," Elise hissed. "You just acted without talking to me, without giving Eloise a chance to say goodbye. Do you know she wrote a note, apologizing to whoever adopted him, telling them to take care of him because she thought we couldn't keep him anymore?" She knew Jonah. Some part of her knew you'd given him away. Jonah slumped against the wall, his face gray. "I didn't know about any note." "No, you didn't. Because you did it behind everyone's backs. And now she's asking for him, thinking he ran away, carrying that hurt on top of everything else." Through the window of Eloise's room, they could see their daughter sleeping, monitors beeping steadily around her. The sight seemed to deflate Jonah completely. "I thought I was protecting her," he whispered. "I thought if she believed he ran away, it would hurt less than knowing we had to give him up. I was wrong. I've been wrong about so many things." Elise's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered it with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Monroe?" Silas Redd's voice was gruff but determined. "I've been thinking about your request, about the note, about Atlas." "Yes? I can't promise anything, but if you text me the hospital details, we'll come by tomorrow. Atlas deserves the chance to complete his mission." "His mission?" "The one your daughter gave him in that note. To be loved, to be remembered. Sometimes a dog needs that as much as we do." Silas Redd sat in his dimly lit home office, staring at the worn piece of paper in his hands. The childish handwriting was smudged, but still legible after all these years. "Please love Atlas as much as I do. I'm sorry I couldn't keep him. He's the best dog in the whole world." Atlas lay at his feet, gray starting to dust his muzzle, but his amber eyes remained alert and focused on his handler. The German Shepherd's head tilted slightly, as if sensing Silas's internal struggle. "What do you think, old friend?" Silas muttered, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Should we get involved in this?" The memory of his last deployment crashed over him like a wave. The explosion, the dust, the cries of his team, his service dog Buck, dying in his arms after saving the entire unit. Silas's hands began to shake, and he clenched them into fists. Getting attached only meant more pain. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, over and over again. But Atlas wasn't just any dog. From the day Silas had adopted him, There was something different about him, a sense of purpose that went beyond training. Atlas whined softly and placed his head on Silas's knee. The gesture, so simple and pure, made Silas's throat tight. He unfolded the note again, reading the last line. "Please tell him I love him every day." At Children's Hospital, Eloise Monroe's condition was deteriorating. Dr. Lenore Hastings studied the latest test results with growing concern, her wire-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "Her oxygen saturation is dropping," she explained to Elise, who stood beside Eloise's bed. "The medication isn't working as well as we'd hoped. If we're going to attempt the experimental procedure, we need to make a decision soon." Eloise stirred restlessly in her sleep, the monitors beeping steadily around her. Elise reached out to smooth her daughter's hair, noting how pale and thin she looked against the white hospital sheets. "How much time do we have?" Elise asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 48 hours, maybe less." Dr. Hastings' normally calm demeanor showed cracks of worry. "The surgery is risky, but without it—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what was at stake. The door opened, and Dr. Marvin Carver strode in, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. "Mrs. Monroe, I understand you're trying to arrange for a dog to visit?" "Yes." Elise straightened her spine, preparing for battle. "It's Eloise's childhood dog. She's asked to see him." "Absolutely not." Carver's voice was clipped and final. "Hospital policy clearly states that only certified therapy animals are allowed in patient rooms. The liability issues alone." "With all due respect," Dr. Hastings interrupted, "this is a special circumstance. Eloise's emotional state could significantly impact her chances of survival." "Rules exist for a reason," Carver insisted. "We can't make exceptions based on sentiment. What if the dog carries infections? What if it becomes aggressive? The hospital cannot take that risk." Meanwhile, across town, Silas paced his living room, the phone call from earlier playing on repeat in his mind. Atlas watched him from his bed in the corner, ears perked forward. "They're just a family wanting closure," Silas muttered to himself. "It's not a mission. It's not your responsibility." But the words felt hollow. He'd seen too much in his years of service to believe that anymore. Sometimes the most important missions weren't about combat or security. They were about healing broken pieces. He picked up his phone and looked at the hospital details Elise had texted him. His thumb hovered over the delete button, but instead he found himself dialing. "Mrs. Monroe, we'll be there tomorrow morning." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Thank you, Mr. Red. You don't know what this means." "Don't thank me yet," he cut her off, his voice gruff but not unkind. "There's no guarantee they'll let us in. And Atlas, he's older now. I don't want anyone disappointed if things don't go as planned." After hanging up, Silas sat on the floor beside Atlas. The shepherd immediately pressed against him, offering the steady comfort that had helped Silas through countless sleepless nights. "Remember when I first saw you at the shelter?" Silas spoke softly, scratching behind Atlas's ears. "You were sitting there so quietly, watching everyone pass by, not begging for attention like the other dogs. Just waiting." Atlas's tail thumped against the floor. "I read that note, and something clicked. Like you weren't just another abandoned dog. You were a soldier like me, waiting for your next mission." Back at the hospital, the tension between Dr. Carver and Elise reached a breaking point. "This is my daughter's life we're talking about." Elise's voice shook with barely controlled anger. "She believes this dog ran away years ago. Finding out he's alive, that he might come see her, it's given her something to hold on to." "Mrs. Monroe," Carver's tone was patronizing, "I understand you're emotional, but—" "No, you don't understand," Dr. Hastings cut in, surprising them both with her vehemence. Eloise's will to live is as important as any medication we can give her. I'm putting my medical opinion on record. This visit could be therapeutic and potentially crucial to her recovery." Carver's face reddened. "That's not your call to make, Dr. Hastings." "Actually, as her attending physician, it is. I'll take full responsibility for any consequences." As the doctors argued, Elise slipped back into Eloise's room. Her daughter was awake now, her large eyes bright with fever. "Mom?" Eloise's voice was weak but hopeful. "Did you find him? Did you find Atlas?" Elise took her daughter's small hand, feeling the flutter of her pulse. "We did, sweetheart. And he never ran away. He's been waiting for you all this time." Eloise's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "When can I see him?" "Soon," Elise promised, praying she wasn't lying. "Very soon." That night, Silas prepared Atlas for their visit. He brushed the shepherd's coat until it gleamed, checked his nails, and went through their old training exercises. Atlas performed each command perfectly, his focus unwavering. "This isn't a military operation," Silas reminded himself. But as he clipped Atlas's leash to his collar, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what they'd both been waiting for. One last mission, not of war, but of healing. He pulled out Eloise's note one more time, studying the words that had haunted him for 4 years. Tomorrow, they would answer that child's plea for love and remembrance. Tomorrow, they would try to make things right. Atlas pressed his nose against Silas's hand, his amber eyes full of understanding. In that moment, Silas realized that sometimes the bravest thing wasn't charging into battle. It was opening your heart to hope again. The first hints of dawn were barely touching the horizon when Silas loaded Atlas into his weathered pickup truck. The German shepherd settled into the familiar passenger seat, his gray-flecked muzzle resting on the worn armrest. The morning air carried a heaviness that spoke of rain to come. 4 hours ahead of us, old friend," Silas said, checking his GPS one last time. He'd mapped the route to St. Mary's Children's Hospital 3 times already, but habits from his military days died hard. Always verify. Always prepare. Atlas watched the road with the same steady focus he'd shown in their working days, when every mission meant lives on the line. Silas glanced at his companion, remembering the countless hours they'd spent just like this, man and dog, moving toward uncertainty together. Meanwhile, in Eloise's hospital room, monitors beeped with increasing urgency. Dr. Hastings frowned at the readings, making careful notes in her chart. The night shift had reported more arrhythmias, and Eloise's oxygen levels weren't holding steady. "We need to consider moving up the timeline," she told Elise and Jonah, who stood on opposite sides of Eloise's bed like sentries. "Her heart is struggling more than we'd like." Elise gripped the bed rail, her knuckles white. "But the dog handler, Mr. Red, he's already on his way. Eloise has been holding on for this." "That's exactly my concern," Jonah cut in, his voice sharp with fear. "She's getting worse because we're filling her head with false hope instead of focusing on what really matters." "What matters is our daughter's happiness," Elise shot back. "Or have you forgotten that too?" The accusation hung in the air between them. Dr. Hastings cleared her throat softly, trying to diffuse the tension. "Perhaps we should step into the hallway?" Outside Eloise's room, the argument continued in heated whispers. "You're being reckless," Jonah insisted, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "We should be discussing treatment options, not chasing fairy tales about a dog that's probably too old to even make the trip." "Like you discussed surrendering Atlas with me?" Elise's words landed like a physical blow. Jonah stumbled back, his face draining of color. "How did you—" The shelter records, Jonah. I saw your signature. Elise's voice cracked. All these years you let her believe he ran away. Let her blame herself. Dr. Hastings stepped between them, her calm presence a buffer against their raw emotions. Whatever happened in the past, right now Eloise needs both of you focused on her future. The experimental procedure I mentioned, it's risky, but it might be our best option. Back on the highway, Silas noticed the darkening sky. Storm clouds were building, heavy and ominous. Atlas shifted restlessly in his seat, sensitive to the changing pressure. Easy, boy, Silas murmured. We've weathered worse. His mind drifted to their last deployment together, before Atlas had been retired. They'd been caught in a sandstorm, visibility 0, but Atlas had led them back to base through sheer instinct and training. Now, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Silas felt that same connection. Two warriors, marked by time, but not defeated by it. He turned on the radio, letting the weather report fill the cab. Severe thunderstorm warning for the following counties. The meteorologist's voice droned on, listing places they'd need to drive through. What do you think, Atlas? One more mission for the record books? Atlas's tail thumped against the seat, his amber eyes fixed on the road ahead. Silas smiled, remembering the first time he'd read Eloise's note in Atlas's adoption file. The carefully printed words of a child. Please take good care of Atlas. He's not just a dog. He's my best friend and a hero. I promise I'll come back for him someday. At the hospital, Dr. Hastings worked late into the morning, reviewing Eloise's case with colleagues across the country. The procedure's experimental, she explained to the parents, but Dr. Chen in Boston had success with a similar case last month. The risks? Jonah asked, his earlier anger replaced by exhaustion. Significant, Dr. Hastings admitted. But doing nothing carries its own certainty. Elise's phone buzzed, a text from Silas. Hitting bad weather, making steady progress, Atlas doing well. She showed the message to Dr. Hastings, who nodded thoughtfully. I'll speak with administration again about allowing the visit. Sometimes rules need to bend before they break us all. The storm intensified as Silas and Atlas continued their journey. Rain lashed against the windshield, and lightning split the sky in brilliant forks. Atlas remained calm, trusting his handler as he always had. Remember that night in Kandahar? Silas spoke into the storm's rhythm. Explosions everywhere, but you never flinched. Just kept working, kept saving lives. He reached over to scratch Atlas's ear. Some things don't change, do they, boy? The mission's different, but the heart's the same. The Wipers fought against the deluge as Silas reduced speed, prioritizing safety over speed. They still had 2 hours to go, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. But neither man nor dog considered turning back. They'd made a promise, not just to Eloise, but to something larger. The idea that loyalty transcends time, that love finds its way home, that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with hope. In Eloise's room, the monitors continued their vigilant watch. The young girl slept fitfully, her dreams filled with memories of a German shepherd's warm fur and gentle eyes. Outside her window, the same storm raged, while inside, her parents maintained their own vigil, divided by past choices, but united in their desperate love for their daughter. Dr. Hastings made another round, checking vitals and adjusting medications. She paused at the door, watching the family, Elise dozing in the hard plastic chair, Jonah pacing by the window, Eloise's small form dwarfed by the hospital bed. In her decades of practice, she'd learned that medicine alone couldn't heal every wound. Sometimes, the most powerful medicine was the kind that couldn't be measured in doses or tracked on charts. The storm growled overhead, a reminder of nature's raw power and the fragility of human plans. But beneath its fury, wheels kept turning, hearts kept beating, and hope, battered but unbroken, kept pushing forward through the darkness. The storm's intensity grew with each passing mile. Sheets of rain hammered against the truck's windshield, while thunder cracked overhead like artillery fire. Silas gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white with tension. Atlas sat alert in the passenger seat, his ears twitching at each thunderclap. "Visibility's getting worse," Silas muttered, leaning forward to peer through the wall of water. The wipers worked frantically, but they could barely keep up with the deluge. His headlights cut weak paths through the darkness, revealing glimpses of standing water on the highway. The truck's tires splashed through another deep puddle, causing the vehicle to hydroplane slightly. Silas corrected with the expertise of years of tactical driving training, but his jaw clenched with concern. The weather radar on his phone had shown solid red across their entire route. This storm wasn't letting up anytime soon. "We've got to keep going, boy," he said to Atlas. "That little girl's waiting for you." Atlas whined softly, pressing closer to Silas's side. The German Shepherd's training had taught him to read human tension, and right now, his handler's anxiety was palpable. A flash of lightning illuminated the road ahead, revealing a partially flooded section of highway. Silas slowed the truck to a crawl, carefully navigating through the deepening water. Other vehicles had pulled off to the shoulder, their hazard lights blinking weakly through the storm. "Should probably do the same," Silas admitted, "but we're running out of time." The next few miles were a blur of concentration and mounting dread. The truck's wheels lost traction more frequently as they encountered deeper water. Silas's world narrowed to the cone of his headlights and the constant roar of rain. Then it happened. A sharp curve appeared suddenly through the rain. Silas began to brake, but the truck's tires hit a patch of standing water. Time seemed to slow as he felt the vehicle begin to slide. His military training kicked in. Turn into the skid, ease off the gas, don't panic. But physics and nature cared nothing for human skill. The truck's rear end swung wide, and Silas felt the sickening sensation of losing control completely. Atlas barked sharply as they left the road, the truck sliding sideways down a muddy embankment. The impact came with a tremendous crash. Metal screamed against earth as the truck rolled onto its side, sliding several yards before coming to rest in a drainage ditch. The engine died, plunging everything into rain-soaked darkness. Silas hung suspended by his seatbelt, pain shooting through his left shoulder and leg. His head throbbed where it had struck the side window. Through blurry vision, he could make out Atlas's form, still secured by the special harness he always wore while traveling. "Atlas," he croaked. "You okay, boy?" The shepherd whined, struggling against the harness. Water was beginning to seep into the cab through gaps in the crumpled metal. The passenger side door, now facing upward, had been warped by the impact. Silas tried to move, but found himself pinned by the crushed steering column. Sharp pain lanced through his leg when he attempted to shift position. "Not good," he muttered, tasting blood from where he'd bit his cheek during the crash. Atlas barked again, more urgently this time. The dog's military training was evident in his focused determination. He wasn't panicking. He was assessing the situation, just as he'd been taught. "Atlas, release," Silas commanded, using the special phrase that would tell the dog to free himself from the harness. Atlas immediately began working at the quick-release mechanism with his teeth, a skill practiced countless times during their service together. Water continued rising in the cab, now reaching Silas's shoulder. The rain showed no sign of letting up, and he realized with growing horror that the ditch could flood completely. "Atlas, you need to get out," he said firmly, using his command voice despite the pain. "Emergency exit, now!" Atlas hesitated, clearly torn between his training to stay with his handler and his training to follow commands. Silas could see the conflict in those intelligent amber eyes. "Go," Silas ordered sharply. "Emergency exit." With one final whine, Atlas threw his weight against the passenger door. The metal groaned but held. He tried again, powerful shoulders straining. On the third attempt, the weakened latch gave way, and the door burst open to the storm. Atlas paused at the opening, looking back at his trapped handler. Rain poured in through the gap, plastering the shepherd's fur to his body. "Find help," Silas said, his voice softening. "Complete the mission, boy. Go find Eloise." Something in Atlas's posture changed at Eloise's name. His ears pricked forward, and his body tensed with newfound purpose. With one final look at Silas, the shepherd launched himself through the opening and into the storm. Silas watched through the rain-streaked window as Atlas's form disappeared into the darkness. The shepherd's training would serve him well. He knew to follow roads, to seek out humans, to persist until he reached his objective. But this was no military operation with clear parameters. This was a night of chaos, flood waters, and a destination Atlas had never seen. "Good luck, old friend," Silas whispered, fighting to stay conscious as the water continued to rise. He had to trust in Atlas now, trust in the bond between handler and dog, in years of training, and in something deeper still. The mysterious connection between a girl's dying wish and a loyal dog's determination to answer it. The storm raged on, swallowing Atlas's path in darkness and rain. But the shepherd had his heading, and nothing, not weather, not distance, not time itself, would stop him from completing this final mission. The rain hammered against Atlas's fur as he pressed forward through the darkness. His military training had taught him to navigate by landmarks, to maintain direction even in the worst conditions. But tonight, something deeper than training pulled him forward, an ancient calling that spoke to the very heart of what it meant to be a dog. Water streamed from his coat as he picked his way along the flooded roadside. His aging joints protested with each step, but the shepherd ignored the discomfort. He had endured far worse during his service years. The mission, finding Eloise, burned in his mind like a beacon. A familiar scent caught his attention, cutting through the rain-washed air. Atlas paused, nose lifting as he tested the wind. Apples, the sweet, rotting smell of fallen fruit. Something stirred in his memory. Sun-dappled afternoons, children's laughter, the cool shade beneath spreading branches. Without conscious thought, his paws turned off the road. He pushed through dripping underbrush, following that remembered scent. The terrain began to feel familiar beneath his pads. Even after 5 years, his body remembered this path. The old orchard materialized out of the rainy darkness. Lightning flashed, illuminating rows of gnarled apple trees standing like sentinels in the storm. Atlas moved between them with growing certainty, guided by memory rather than sight. His military training had honed his already impressive recall. Now those skills served a different purpose as he retraced steps taken years ago. Another flash of lightning revealed his destination, the ancient apple tree that stood apart from its orderly companions. Its twisted trunk and spreading branches were exactly as he remembered. How many summer days had he spent beneath this tree, watching over a small girl as she read books or drew pictures in her notebook? Atlas circled the trunk, nose working. The rain had saturated the ground, turning everything to mud. But underneath the storm's assault, older scents lingered. Here, this spot. He remembered watching Eloise dig here, remembered her small hands patting the earth back into place. "It's our secret, Atlas," she had whispered, her arms around his neck. "Promise you'll remember where it is?" He had licked her face then, making her giggle. Now, 5 years later, He honored that promise. His powerful paws began to dig, throwing mud aside in great sprays. The work was harder than it should have been. His right shoulder still ached from the truck's impact, and his paws were raw from miles of wet pavement. But Atlas persisted. 6 inches down, his claws struck something solid. Working more carefully now, he excavated around the object, using his nose to guide him when his eyes couldn't penetrate the mud. Gradually, a wooden box emerged from its earthen tomb. Atlas gently freed it from the last clinging soil. The box was small, perhaps 12 inches square, and made of pine, its surface weathered but intact, thanks to careful waterproofing. A child's careful handwriting was still visible on the lid, protected by layers of clear varnish. Eloise and Atlas, best friends forever. The shepherd nosed the box gently, inhaling deeply. Under the mud and years of burial, Eloise's scent still clung faintly to the wood. His tail wagged once, remembering the girl who had trusted him with this treasure. Carefully, Atlas took the box between his teeth. The wood was slick with rain and mud, but he found secure purchase on one corner. It wasn't the first time he'd carried precious cargo. His service years had included numerous recovery missions. But never had a package felt quite so important as this mud-streaked box from the past. Lightning split the sky again as Atlas turned away from the apple tree. His internal compass oriented on the distant lights of town, barely visible through the storm. Every muscle in his body ached for rest, and the box was an awkward burden. But Atlas had never failed a mission, and he wouldn't fail this one. He picked his way back through the orchard, moving more slowly now with his precious cargo. The box bumped gently against his chest with each step, a reminder of his purpose. Somewhere in those distant lights, Eloise was waiting. He didn't understand the passage of time as humans did, but he understood promises. And he had made 2, one to a small girl under an apple tree, and another to his handler in an overturned truck. Atlas reached the road and turned toward town. The rain continued to fall, and exhaustion dragged at his limbs, but his determination never wavered. One step at a time, through the storm and darkness, he carried Eloise's box toward its destination. The shepherd had found what he was sent to retrieve. Now he just had to complete the delivery. Each step was a struggle against mud and fatigue. His graying muzzle dripped with rain, and his breath came in heavy pants around the box in his teeth. But Atlas pressed on, driven by training, loyalty, and love. The mission wasn't complete until Eloise held this box in her hands. Only then could he rest. Thunder rolled overhead as Atlas trudged onward, a solitary figure moving through the storm. The time capsule bumped steadily against his chest, keeping time with his heartbeat, a rhythm of determination that would carry him through the night, through the rain, through whatever obstacles lay between him and his goal. The steady beeping of Eloise's heart monitor suddenly changed its rhythm, the sound turning urgent and erratic. Dr. Lenore Hastings looked up sharply from her charts, her experienced eyes taking in the falling numbers on the display. Eloise's oxygen levels were plummeting, and her heart rate was becoming dangerously irregular. "Code Blue, I need a response team in here now," Dr. Hastings called out, her calm voice carrying the authority that sent nurses rushing into action. She pressed the emergency call button, then moved swiftly to Eloise's bedside. Elise Monroe jerked awake from her uncomfortable doze in the bedside chair, her tired eyes widening with fear. "What's happening?" she asked, stumbling to her feet as medical staff flooded into the room. "Her heart's struggling," Dr. Hastings explained, already checking Eloise's vital signs. "Mr. Monroe, please step back and give us room to work," she directed toward Jonah, who had been standing by the window. The next few minutes were a blur of controlled chaos as the medical team worked to stabilize Eloise. Through it all, the 12-year-old girl remained unconscious, her pale face a stark contrast against the white hospital pillows. Finally, the immediate crisis passed, but Dr. Hastings' expression remained grave. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, we need to talk," she said, gesturing for them to follow her to a small consultation room down the hall. Once inside, she closed the door and turned to face them. "Eloise's condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated. Her heart simply can't keep up with her body's needs anymore." Elise gripped Jonah's hand tightly. "What are our options?" Dr. Hastings removed her wire-rimmed glasses, cleaning them with deliberate care as she gathered her thoughts. "There is one possibility we haven't discussed yet. It's an experimental procedure, one that's shown promising results in similar cases. However, it carries significant risks." She went on to explain the details of the surgery, using simple terms, but not sugarcoating the dangers. The procedure would require stopping Eloise's heart completely for several minutes while we attempt to repair the damaged tissue. It's never been performed on someone as young as Eloise, but theoretically, her age could work in her favor. Younger patients often heal better. "What are her chances without the surgery?" Jonah asked, his voice rough with emotion. "At the rate her condition is declining?" Dr. Hastings shook her head. "Days, maybe a week at most." Elise straightened in her chair, her exhausted face showing fresh determination. "Then we have to try. We can't just let her—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Hold on," Jonah interjected, running his hands through his graying hair. "This isn't just a simple yes or no. We're talking about putting our daughter through an experimental procedure that could kill her on the spot." "And doing nothing will definitely kill her," Elise shot back, her voice rising. "We have to give her a chance." "Like the chance I gave her with Atlas?" Jonah burst out, then immediately looked like he wanted to take the words back. Elise stared at him, realization dawning in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Jonah slumped in his chair, the weight of years of guilt finally breaking through. I was the one who got rid of Atlas. We were drowning in medical bills and I couldn't see any way out. The dog was just one more mouth to feed, one more responsibility we couldn't afford. So I took him to the shelter while you were at work and Eloise was at school." "You?" Elise whispered, her face pale with shock. "All this time you let Eloise believe he ran away, let her blame herself." "I know," Jonah's voice cracked. "I know it was wrong. I've regretted it every day since. And now you're asking me to make another decision that could take her from us completely? I can't. I can't be responsible for failing her again." Dr. Hastings, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mr. Monroe, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is face our fears and make the hard choices anyway. Eloise needs both her parents to be strong right now." Before anyone could respond, there was a knock at the door. Dr. Marvin Carver entered, his pristine white coat a stark contrast to his thunderous expression. "Dr. Hastings, I've just been informed that there's some plan to bring a dog into my cardiac ward." "Yes," Elise said, standing up. "Our daughter's dog is on his way. It's her dying wish to see him." "Absolutely not," Dr. Carver declared flatly. "This is a sterile environment. We have protocols for a reason. I cannot allow an animal to compromise the health of our other patients." "With all due respect," Dr. Hastings interjected, "there are numerous studies showing the positive effects of animal therapy on cardiac patients. In Eloise's case?" "In Eloise's case," Dr. Carver cut her off, "we need to maintain proper medical protocols. I sympathize with the emotional aspect, but my decision is final." Elise stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Your decision? My daughter is dying. She has never asked for anything through years of surgeries and treatments. The one thing she wants, the only thing she's asked for, is to see her dog. And you're going to deny her that because of protocols?" "Mrs. Monroe," Dr. Carver began, but Elise wasn't finished. No, you listen to me. Eloise deserves better than to die surrounded by nothing but machines and rules. She deserves to feel loved and safe and happy, even if it's just for a few minutes. And if you think I'm going to let your bureaucratic fears stand in the way of that, you don't know what a mother is capable of. In the charged silence that followed, Jonah slowly stood up. She's right, he said quietly. I've spent too long letting fear make my decisions. Not anymore. He turned to Dr. Hastings. The surgery. Do it. Whatever chance it gives her, we have to try. Dr. Hastings nodded, relief visible in her eyes. I'll start making the arrangements immediately. And the dog? Dr. Carver demanded. Will be properly cleaned and monitored, Dr. Hastings assured him. I'll take personal responsibility for ensuring all necessary precautions are taken. Dr. Carver looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in the united front before him made him reconsider. Fine, he said stiffly, but everything must be documented, and any complications will be on your head, Dr. Hastings. As Dr. Carver left the room, Elise turned to Jonah. Thank you, she said softly, for choosing to be brave. Jonah reached for her hand. I should have told you about Atlas years ago. I'm sorry. So sorry. We can't change the past, Elise replied, but we can be better now, for Eloise. Dr. Hastings cleared her throat gently. I need to get started on the surgical preparations. We'll want to move quickly once we have everything in place. They nodded, and as they left the consultation room, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. But for the first time in years, they were truly united in their purpose, to give their daughter every possible chance at life, and to make whatever time she had left as full of love as they could make it. The hospital's emergency entrance doors slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a gust of rain-laden wind and something else, something that made the night security guard blink twice in disbelief. There, dripping water onto the pristine floor tiles, stood a large German shepherd. The dog's fur was matted with mud, one paw held slightly off the ground, but his amber eyes burned with unwavering purpose. In his mouth, he carried a weathered wooden box. Hey, the guard called out, rising from his desk. You can't be in here. Atlas ignored him completely, his nose working the air as he limped purposefully across the lobby. The late-night skeleton crew of nurses and orderlies stopped in their tracks, watching in amazement as this determined animal made his way toward the bank of elevators as if he knew exactly where he was going. Someone call security, a nurse's voice rang out. Dr. Lenore Hastings had just stepped out of the elevator, reviewing Eloise's latest test results on her tablet, when she nearly collided with the mud-covered shepherd. She gasped, then froze as recognition dawned in her eyes. Atlas? The dog's tail gave a single wag of acknowledgement, but he didn't stop. He was clearly on a mission. Wait! Dr. Hastings called out, hurrying after him. He's expected. This is Eloise Monroe's dog. The commotion drew more attention, including that of Dr. Marvin Carver, who emerged from his office with thunderous disapproval etched across his face. What is the meaning of this? I expressly forbade. Section 23.4 of the hospital bylaws, Dr. Hastings interrupted, her voice carrying clearly across the lobby, allows for emergency exceptions to standard protocols when a patient's psychological stability is at risk. Eloise Monroe's condition has been deteriorating rapidly, and this dog is a documented emotional support animal crucial to her mental well-being. That's a complete fabrication, Dr. Carver spluttered. That animal is filthy, injured, and can be properly cleaned and examined by our veterinary liaison before entering any sterile areas, Dr. Hastings countered smoothly. She turned to the nearest nurse. Please contact Dr. Williams in Veterinary Services immediately. This is a priority case. Jonah Monroe, who had been, getting coffee from the vending machine, dropped his cup at the sight of Atlas. The dark liquid spread across the floor like spilled ink as he stared at the dog he had surrendered years ago. Atlas met his gaze for a brief moment, and Jonah saw not accusation, but something far worse, unwavering loyalty that he himself had betrayed. "My God," Jonah whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You never stopped trying to get back to her, did you?" Atlas's only response was to adjust his grip on the wooden box and continue his determined path toward Eloise's room. The box, Jonah recognized it now, was the time capsule Eloise had buried with Atlas the summer before everything fell apart. The summer before Jonah's fear of mounting medical bills had led him to make the decision that had haunted them all. Dr. Hastings quickly took charge of the situation. "Mr. Monroe, please help me with Atlas. We'll need to clean him up before he can see Eloise." She turned to address the gathering crowd of hospital staff. "This dog has traveled through tonight's storm to reach a dying child. Surely we can show some humanity and help make this happen properly." Several nurses nodded, already moving to assist. Even some of those who had initially called for security were now watching Atlas with soft, understanding expressions. Dr. Carver attempted one final protest. "The liability alone will be fully covered under my personal malpractice insurance," Dr. Hastings cut in. "I'm willing to put that in writing right now if you need it." A young nurse appeared with a handful of clean towels, while another brought a basin of warm water. They worked quickly but gently, cleaning the mud from Atlas's fur while carefully checking him for serious injuries. His paw was swollen but not broken, and despite his exhaustion, he remained perfectly still for their ministrations. "The box," Jonah said softly, reaching for it. "I can hold it while they clean you up, boy." Atlas released the time capsule into Jonah's hands with careful deliberation. The wood was wet but intact, preserved by whatever Eloise had used to seal it all those years ago. Jonah cradled it like something precious, which, he realized, it was. Dr. Williams, the hospital's veterinary liaison, arrived promptly and gave Atlas a thorough checkup. "He's tired and a bit banged up, but nothing serious," she concluded. "I can wrap that paw and give him something mild for the pain. He's clearly well-trained and healthy overall." Dr. Hastings nodded. "Thank you." She turned to Dr. Carver, who still hovered nearby with a disapproving frown. "There's your medical clearance. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a patient waiting." The small procession, Dr. Hastings, Jonah, and a freshly cleaned Atlas, made their way to Eloise's floor. The night shift nurses there had already heard what was happening, and they watched with misty eyes as Atlas padded past their station, his bandaged paw forgotten in his determination to reach his goal. Outside Eloise's room, they paused. Through the window they could see Elise holding their daughter's frail hand, speaking softly to her pale face. The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat. "Wait here," Dr. Hastings said softly. She entered the room first, speaking quietly to Elise, whose eyes widened as she looked toward the door. Jonah knelt beside Atlas. "I'm so sorry, old friend. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was just scared. You never gave up on her, though, did you? Not even when I did." Atlas's eyes remained fixed on Eloise's form in the hospital bed, but his tail brushed against Jonah's leg. Not quite forgiveness, perhaps, but acknowledgement. Dr. Hastings beckoned them in. "Eloise," she said gently. "Someone's here to see you." Eloise's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as Atlas stepped into view. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The beeping monitors, the hum of medical equipment, the whispers of observers in the hallway, all faded away as dog and girl looked at each other across years of separation. "Atlas?" Eloise's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried all the wonder in the world. "You came back?" Atlas moved forward with gentle precision, mindful of the tubes and wires surrounding Eloise's bed. He placed his head carefully on the edge of her mattress, and Eloise's thin fingers found their way into his fur. "You're real," she breathed. "You're really here." Atlas watched Eloise intently, his amber eyes never leaving her face. With careful movements that spoke of his years of training, he gathered himself and made a graceful leap onto the foot of her bed. The nurses gasped, but Dr. Hastings held up a hand to stop any intervention. The German shepherd's movements were precise, deliberate, and gentle as he settled his weight away from Eloise's legs. In his mouth, he still carried the wooden box, weathered by years underground, but still intact. With infinite tenderness, he placed it on the blanket near Eloise's hands. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. "Is that—" Elise's voice trailed off as she recognized the small time capsule her daughter had crafted so long ago. Eloise's fingers trembled as she reached for the box. Though weak from her condition, her eyes sparked with recognition. "Our treasure box," she whispered to Atlas. "You remembered?" The lid creaked softly as she opened it. Inside, protected by careful layers of plastic wrap and childhood determination, lay a single envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but Eloise's careful printing was still clear. "To me, from me, when I need it most." Elise helped Eloise hold the letter steady as she unfolded it. The words, written in the careful hand of a 7-year-old, filled the page. "Dear future Eloise, if you're reading this, it means Atlas brought it to you because you needed it. He promised he would. He's the best dog ever, and he never breaks. His promises. Remember when you were scared of the thunder but Atlas stayed with you all night? Remember when you fell off your bike and he licked your tears away? Atlas says you're brave even when you don't feel brave. He says you're strong even when you feel weak. And he's right because dogs always know the truth about people. Mom says everyone has a special light inside them. Sometimes we forget it's there, but it never goes out. Atlas sees your light. I see it too because I'm you, and I know it's bright and beautiful and worth fighting for. So if you're reading this, it means you need to remember. You are worth loving. You are worth fighting for. You are braver than you think. Atlas and I love you forever and ever. Eloise, age 7. Tears rolled down Eloise's cheeks as she finished reading. Atlas inched forward on the bed until his head rested near her shoulder, offering the comfort he had given countless times before. Eloise buried her fingers in his fur, holding on as if he were an anchor in a storm. The letter trembled in her other hand as she read it again. Silently this time. Her younger self's words seemed to fill the room with a strange kind of magic. The pure, unshakable faith of a child, combined with the unwavering loyalty of a dog who had crossed miles through darkness to deliver this message. Jonah, who had been standing frozen by the door, suddenly stumbled forward. His face was wet with tears, and his shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. He fell to his knees beside Eloise's bed. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "It was me. I'm the reason Atlas disappeared." His words came in rushes now, as if a dam had broken. "We were drowning in medical bills. The insurance wasn't covering everything, and I was so scared. The shelter promised they'd find him a good home, and I thought I was choosing between your treatment and keeping him. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Eloise's hand tightened in Atlas's fur as she listened to her father's confession. The monitors showed her heart rate increasing, but Dr. Hastings didn't intervene. This was a different kind of medicine at work. "I've carried this guilt for years," Jonah continued. "Watching you grieve, letting you believe he ran away, I was a coward. But look at him, Eloise. Look at what he did to get back to you. He never forgot. He never stopped loving you." Atlas turned his head slightly to look at Jonah. And in that moment, something passed between man and dog. Not quite forgiveness, but understanding. They were both here now for the same reason. Eloise. Eloise looked from the letter to Atlas to her father, then finally to Dr. Hastings. Her voice was quiet but steady when she spoke. "The surgery you talked about, the one that might help. I want to do it." Dr. Hastings stepped closer. "Are you sure, Eloise? It's a difficult procedure, and the recovery won't be easy." Eloise nodded, her hand still buried in Atlas's fur. "My letter says I'm braver than I think. And Atlas came all this way to remind me." She looked up at her parents, her eyes clear and determined. "I want to fight. I want to live." Elise squeezed her daughter's hand, while Jonah reached out to touch both Eloise and Atlas, bridging the gap of years with a simple gesture. Atlas settled more firmly against Eloise's side, his presence solid and reassuring, just as it had been during long-ago thunderstorms. The letter lay open on the blanket, its message clear in the soft hospital light. "You are worth loving. You are worth fighting for." Words written by a child who knew nothing of the struggles ahead, delivered by a dog who had never forgotten his promise, now giving strength to a girl who needed to remember her own light. The preparations for surgery moved with practiced urgency through the cardiac ward. Nurses wheeled equipment into the operating room, while Dr. Hastings stood with Elise and Jonah in a small consultation room, her wire-rimmed glasses catching the fluorescent light as she detailed the procedure. "The surgery will take approximately 6 hours," Dr. Hastings explained, her voice steady and measured. "We'll be attempting to repair the structural damage to Eloise's heart while also implementing the experimental procedure we discussed." Elise gripped Jonah's hand as Dr. Hastings continued. "I need you to understand the risks. There's a 30% chance of complications, including—" She paused, making sure they were following. "Including heart failure during the procedure itself." Jonah's hand trembled as he reached for the consent form. The pen felt heavy, almost foreign in his grip. Each letter of his signature seemed to take tremendous effort, as if he were signing away more than just permission. He was signing away certainty, control, maybe even his daughter's life. The double doors at the end of the hall burst open, and Silas Red stumbled through, supported by a nurse. His face was bruised, with butterfly bandages across his forehead. His clothes were still damp and mud-stained from the accident. "Had to be here," he muttered, wincing as he straightened up. Atlas found his way. Least I could do is see it through. Dr. Hastings nodded to the nurse. "Get Mr. Red settled in the waiting area, and make sure someone looks at those ribs." In the operating room, Eloise lay small and pale under the harsh surgical lights. The anesthesiologist carefully monitored her vitals as Dr. Hastings and her team began the delicate procedure. The steady beep of heart monitors created a rhythm that matched the precise movements of surgical instruments. 3 hours into the surgery, the first alarm sounded. Eloise's heart rate began to fluctuate dangerously. Dr. Hastings' hands remained steady, but her voice carried new urgency. "Blood pressure dropping. We need to stabilize before we continue." The monitors screamed their warning as Eloise's heart stopped completely. The flat line cut through the operating room like a knife. "Beginning chest. Compressions," Dr. Hastings announced. "Push 1 milligram of epinephrine." Her hands moved with controlled force, pressing down on Eloise's chest in perfect rhythm. "Come on, Eloise. You promised to fight." The surgical team moved in coordinated desperation, passing instruments, monitoring vitals, preparing the defibrillator. The paddles came down once, twice, 3 times. Each shock lifted Eloise's small body off the table, but the monitor continued its unbroken tone. "Again," Dr. Hastings ordered, her voice tight with determination. The sound of the defibrillator charging filled the room. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once, measured now in heartbeats, the ones that weren't coming. In the waiting room, Elise paced while Jonah sat motionless, his head in his hands. Silas leaned against the wall, his own injuries forgotten as they all waited for news. Atlas, who had been allowed to stay thanks to Dr. Hastings's intervention, lay alert by the door, his eyes fixed on the corridor leading to the operating room. Back in surgery, Dr. Hastings called for another round of epinephrine. Her team moved with renewed intensity, fighting against time and probability. The flat line on the monitor stretched on, a thin green thread between life and death, waiting to be broken. The alarms continued their urgent chorus as the surgical team battled to restart Eloise's heart, their efforts echoing through the sterile room like prayers made of medicine and machinery. Each second that passed made the next one more crucial, more desperate, more determined. Dr. Hastings' voice cut through the chaos with surgical precision. "We are not losing her. Not today. Not after everything." Her hands never stopped their rhythm, pressing life back into Eloise's silent heart, refusing to accept defeat. The monitors continued their relentless alarm, marking each moment Eloise's heart remained still, while the surgical team worked with fierce focus to change that terrible sound. The operating room became a battlefield where every second counted, every action mattered, and Eloise's life hung in the balance between one heartbeat and the next. The waiting room clock ticked with merciless precision as Elise wore a path in the floor tiles. 7 hours had passed since Eloise went into surgery. Jonah hadn't moved from his chair in the last 3, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Silas sat with his back straight despite his injuries, his military training evident in his posture even now. Atlas lay at their feet, releasing occasional soft whines that seemed to echo everyone's anxiety. His ears perked up at every footstep in the hallway, only to lower again when another stranger passed by. "She's strong," Silas offered quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "Strongest 12-year-old I've never met." Elise paused her pacing, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing Atlas, for everything." The door swung open, and Dr. Hastings appeared, still in her surgical scrubs. Her face showed exhaustion, but her eyes held something else, something that made everyone hold their breath. "Eloise made it," she announced, her voice thick with emotion. "We lost her for 4 minutes and 12 seconds on the table, but she fought her way back. The surgery was successful." The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning fully registered. Elise's legs gave out, and Jonah caught her as they both sank to the floor, crying and holding each other. Atlas's tail began to thump against the floor, as if he understood perfectly well. Silas pressed his hands to his face, his shoulders shaking slightly. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes, too. "That's one tough kid," he managed to say. "The next 24 hours will be critical," Dr. Hastings continued, her voice gentle but professional. "But Eloise is showing remarkable resilience. Her new heart structure is already responding well to the repairs." Elise and Jonah clung to each other, years of distance dissolving in their shared relief. Atlas moved to them, pressing his warm body against their sides, offering comfort as naturally as breathing. "When can we see her?" Jonah asked, his voice raw. "She'll be in recovery for several hours," Dr. Hastings replied. "But I think we can arrange something special for when she wakes up." She glanced meaningfully at Atlas, who wagged his tail in response. The relief in the room was almost tangible, hanging in the air like a blessing. They had all been holding their breath for so long, and finally, they could exhale. Through the orchard's dappled sunlight, Eloise took careful steps along the familiar dirt path, her hand resting lightly on Atlas's sturdy back. The German Shepherd matched her pace perfectly, adjusting his stride to her still recovering strength. 3 months had passed since the surgery, and each day brought new victories, both small and large. "Looking good, kiddo," Silas called from where he sat on the old wooden bench, his usual guardedness replaced by genuine warmth. He visited twice a week now, claiming it was to check on Atlas, but everyone knew better. Elise and Jonah walked a few paces behind, giving Eloise space while staying close enough to help if needed. Their hands were clasped together, a sight that had become wonderfully common these days. The weight of old secrets and guilt had lifted, leaving room for healing that went far beyond Eloise's physical recovery. "Atlas, wait," Eloise commanded softly as she paused to catch her breath. The shepherd immediately stopped, positioning himself firmly against her leg for support. His amber eyes watched her face carefully, reading her needs as clearly as if she'd spoken them. "Do you need to rest, honey?" Elise asked, taking a step forward. Eloise shook her head, determination bright in her eyes. "Just catching my breath. I want to make it to the apple tree today." The old apple tree where everything had started and, in a way, ended up coming full circle. It stood ahead of them, its branches heavy with early autumn fruit. The hole Atlas had dug months ago was now filled in, but everyone remembered what had been buried there and what it had meant. "You've got this," Jonah encouraged, his voice strong and steady. The fear that had once made him surrender Atlas was gone, replaced by a father's fierce pride and unwavering support. Eloise took another deep breath and started forward again. Atlas moved with her, his presence as constant as gravity. Together they made their way down the familiar path, each step a testament to survival, to love, to the unbreakable bonds that had brought them all back together. When they reached the apple tree, Eloise's smile was brighter than the sunlight filtering through the leaves above. She had done it, one more victory in a long line of them, with many more to come. "I brought something special," Eloise announced, pulling a small wooden box from her backpack. Unlike the weathered time capsule Atlas had retrieved months ago, this one was newly made, its pine surface still fresh and bright. Silas stepped forward, a knowing smile on his weathered face. "Perfect spot right here," he said, kneeling down to help dig. Atlas watched with interest, his tail wagging as he remembered his own desperate digging on that stormy night. "What's in it this time?" Jonah asked, his arm wrapped around Elise's shoulders. Eloise opened the box, revealing a collection of carefully chosen items. "My first post-surgery EKG showing my strong heart," she explained, touching each item. "A photo of all of us together. And..." She pulled out a letter, different from the desperate plea she'd written as a younger child. "This one's about my hopes, about becoming a therapy dog trainer like Silas, about helping other kids who are scared like I was." Silas looked up from his digging, surprise and pride crossing his face. "You're going to make an excellent trainer," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. After deciding to stay in town, he'd started a therapy dog program at the hospital, with Dr. Carver's full support, surprisingly enough. The hospital administrator had undergone his own transformation after witnessing Atlas's impact. His new policies now allowed therapy dogs in most wards, bringing comfort to countless young patients. Sometimes rules needed to bend to make room for hope. Together, Eloise and Silas lowered the new time capsule into the earth. Atlas supervised the operation with dignified attention, his gray muzzle now touched with white, but his eyes still bright and alert. "This time," Eloise said as they covered the box with soil, "it's not goodbye. It's hello to everything coming next." The old apple tree stood sentinel over their small ceremony, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. Below its roots lay not just a box of hopes and dreams, but the foundation of a future built on second chances, courage, and the kind of love that could find its way home through any storm. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.